Hey, welcome to my channel. My name is Bee and this is where I talk about knitting and crochet, and today I want to see if I can pass the audition task for Game of Wool. So Game of Wool is the new knitting competition show that's on Channel 4 here in the UK. It's hosted by Tom Daley. We've had one episode of it so far and I'm not loving it. I feel like a lot's missing. And I was thinking, should I do a reaction video to it and kind of talk about the issues I have? But then I'm like, it's episode 1. We don't know what's coming next. I have some theories about why the first episode was so bad that I'm going to talk about a little bit. But I thought what might be a bit more interesting is if I saw if I can pass the audition task they had for the participants. So the audition task, I found out about this by watching Stuart the Wool Patch, and he does he used to do reaction videos to Sewing Bee, and now he also does reaction videos or episode wrap-ups for Game of Wool. And he went on one of the auditions for Game of Wool when they were recruiting participants, and he did a video where he talked about what that audition process was like and what he was asked to do. Obviously I'm not going to be able to completely recreate it, like it sounds like it was hell, to be honest. Like he's very upbeat about it all and everything, but he described he was there for 4 hours just knitting straight before they even actually did the task, which already is a lot. Room full of people. Apparently they were sitting on picnic benches the entire time, which for people not in the UK, this is what a picnic bench is. For 4 hours, and then you go into the task. So there's 2 tasks that they have to do. Firstly, the knitting task was they had to knit a beanie in 90 minutes. Stuart said they did it on size 9, size 10 needles, and they did it with chunky wool. So on the first episode they used Big Wool by Rowan, and I actually have some wool that I bought as a dupe for that a while ago on a pattern I was working on. So it's this stuff from Drops Alpaca. I think it's Nepal. It's horrible. It's not fun to knit with. The more I knit with it, the more fibres fly off it. I ended up abandoning the project I was knitting with it because I disliked it so much. I've been wondering what to do with it. So I thought I'd use it for this project. And I don't have any DPNs in size 9 or 10, so I'm going to knit this on flat needles. I'm going to knit on straight needles. I already actually had a crack at this, because I was like, I don't want to film a whole video if it gets to like 90 minutes in and all I've done is the brim or something. And I actually made the entire hat. I mean, the thing is, like, it looks like I just used needles that were too big. I used size 10, but it looks like this on all needles. I have knitted this down on size 6 needles and it's still really gappy. It's like the wool is just full of self-loathing and doesn't want to attach to anything. And I finished it in 70 minutes. And I'm not a very fast knitter. I do the English throwing style of knitting. If I look at the picture of what Stuart came up with, it does look like he's on a tighter gauge and thinner wool than me, even if they were using size 9 and 10. So I've got a ton more of this left. I've decided I'm going to go for size 8 needles, because I think that's going to get me to a closer gauge to the one he was knitting with. I think it's a bit rogue that I, as a not very fast knitter, finished in 70 minutes, so I think I was definitely going too easy on myself and using needles that were too big. So that's my plan. And then the crochet task was they had to crochet a square, and Stuart didn't say the name of the square. Hey, so while I was editing this, I realised I did a really bad job explaining what I was doing for the crochet task or how I was approaching it, so I'm popping in later to try and be a bit more coherent. This was the square that Stuart showed, and he said they had to create the square to a pattern in 45 minutes. And firstly, just want to point out how much more sophisticated the crochet task is than the knitting task, which makes me hopeful for when we do get crochet stuff that it might be a bit more focused on what can you do rather than how quickly can you do it. I was looking at the square and trying to think where I've seen similar things and where I can find a pattern for it, and I'm going to use the back of this to illustrate. This is the thing that fits on the back of my office chair, and it's a square that I got from a pattern which I'll put on screen, and I think it's similar enough to be a dupe for this. So it's got the same little point bits here, it's got a similar looking number of rounds, it's that classic take a circle, turn it into a square technique. So I decided that I was going to try and do one of these in 45 minutes. Yes, I have made this before, but the last time I made one of these was back in January, and I felt very confident. I'd lost all muscle memory of this, and so this is what I tried to do. So that's my plan for today. I'm gonna knit the hat. I'll talk a little bit while I'm knitting it about you know, my progress and everything, but then also I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the disappointments of the first episode, some of the things I hope that they'll improve for the next episode. There's definitely quite a few programs that I think that they could take some learnings from. I'm very aware that the company that is making this show, I think they're called Hiya Hello or something, or Hello Hey, and they're a Scottish-based company based in Glasgow, which in the UK, it's still quite rare. My assumption would be this is a film studio, like it's a production company in the south. So the fact that it's a Scottish production company filming in Scotland, I think that's great. And also if you look at the list of programs they've never made a show like this. So I'm kind of trying to sort of keep that in mind. Like, do I wish that the production company that made like Bake Off or Sewing was making this? Kind of. Yeah, I'm just trying to take it as like they're still trying some stuff out. They're still trying to kind of work out how to do this. So I'm also going to include some stuff that I hope that they tweak or change for future episodes. For now, I'm going to get set up and cast on for the hat. Alright, I've cast on. Already I feel this hat is going to be tiny, but let's start the ribbing and let's talk a little bit about the show. So hopefully I'll have put it in the description already, but obviously there are going to be spoilers. I feel like there's been so much chat about what people don't like about the show, but it seems to be a very, very clear division, doesn't it, between people who like it and people who didn't like it. And the people who didn't like it are people who knit, and the people who did like it are people who don't really knit, or don't knit a lot. And a lot of the pure crocheters I know seem to quite like it. I don't know if that's because they haven't seen their craft absolutely trashed yet. No, trashed is a harsh word. It's not trashed, it's just... So when I first saw the kind of like that they were going to do Fair Isle tops, I immediately was just like, I hate it, I don't want it, oh, why have they done this, why? And I had, you know, people saying like, oh, why are you worried, it'll be fine, it'll be interesting. It's like, yeah, Fair Isle is interesting. A Fair Isle hat, a Fair Isle cowl, or fingerless gloves, or just say to them you need to make something with a certain amount of wool in Fair Isle. Because what I feel like we get with a big chunky wool Fair Isle task is, firstly, it wasn't Fair Isle, it was just colour work. Fair Isle is a geographically specific craft that developed with specific techniques. It's generally 2-ply, usually done in wool, using a limited colour palette. You never have generally more than 3 or 4 stitches in a row of the same colour, so there's no need to like catch floats. And that was something, wasn't it, where it's like a lot of people clearly have really tight floats and really big tension issues. You don't get in traditional Fair Isle like long stretches of colour, etc, you know? And part of me is like, yeah, well, does it matter? You know, it was, the whole point of it was to watch people knitting, to watch them knit cool stuff, etc. I did like some of the designs, particularly Isaac's, loved the geese. The reason it matters is here in the UK, it's very England centric, and crafts and art, like craft work that comes out of other parts of the UK can be really, really dismissed as being primitive and less sophisticated, etc. And there has been a bit of a history of craft work from places around the UK. It needs to be kind of almost endorsed by English gentry kind of thing. So for example, Irish lace is identified and understood to be incredible, like so delicate, so amazing, so detailed, really artisan. You can see why people were kind of obsessed with it and would pay a lot of money for it and everything. But that was decided on by a lot of English gentry and aristocracy. The reason this matters is that Fair Isle knitting took a while to catch on, and a lot of what came out of Scotland for the longest time was seen as being quite rough, quite primitive, and the idea that Scottish people were less developed or more barbarian-like, I mean, that dates really, really, really far back to, you know, way before the United Kingdom was a thing. But it was used as an excuse for land grabbing, for example, by English people going up to Scotland, claiming massive swathes of the country as their own. You know, there was a lot of kind of rhetoric around, could they be trusted to take care of the land? There is a really sordid history of this, and I am getting to a point, I promise. People were forcibly moved off from their land. People were subject to starvation. People were abused, and a lot of it was explained away in this way, that the English had some kind of right to do this. That's why people hold very closely to these heritage crafts that are uniquely Scottish, and it's one of the reasons why they feel very like they're very important and they want to protect them. And then you have this programme that is done by a Scottish production company, and I think that my most positive interpretation of why they chose Fair Isle for the first task was because they wanted to showcase Scottish craftsmanship. And Fair Isle is incredibly intricate and incredibly detailed and lovely and everything, but it's really noticeable that it only became popular when one of the Windsors, I can't remember which one, wore it. And in a way that confers a kind of like recognition on it, but it's very noticeable in this picture of him wearing it that he is dressed incredibly casually. Even though this is an incredibly detailed, intricate craft, he is wearing it to essentially play a sport, like to golf in. He's wearing it in a very casual way. It's not part of any pomp. It only has value in terms of a casual craft. You know, it's not given the same kind of elevation that other incredibly detailed fabricats might be. God, this is going to be a nightmare to edit. So for a Scottish company to feature Fair Isle, but then to massively strip it back and not acknowledge any of the kind of regional nuance that comes with it, to not acknowledge the way that all the motifs, they often have like geographical connotations, religious connotations, and religion has been such a kind of like such a fractious issue in Scotland, and obviously for a very long time between Scotland and England, and it is a very big divide that's been there for a long time. So for a craft that does have a lot of religious symbols in it as well, but also has a lot of geographical symbols where it kind of donated where someone might be from or where they would draw inspiration from, and for all of that to be ignored, as it were, and for this Scottish-made programme about a Scottish craft to only use wool from an English production company when there are so many amazing Scottish wools they could have used and that they could have highlighted, it just feels so rushed and misplaced, which is what a lot of the show feels like. You know, I think using a Fair Isle for it feels very much like a metaphor for the entire show. They had Gordon steeking in it, and that was used as a point of high drama for the episode. You know, oh, he's steeking, can you believe he's steeking? And the thing is, I was watching it and I was like, oh God, I can't believe he's doing that. Because that's an intricate technique, you know, that ideally you would have time and space to do. You would not be rushing into it as part of a 12-hour challenge. Firstly, they didn't explain why steeking was a thing, and secondly, he did do it successfully. He did successfully steek, and he has released things since to kind of explain that the reason he didn't get to finish his garment was because of other things. It was because I think he added a pocket, he was doing a modification on it, all of this stuff, but the steeking was one of the only authentic bits of Fair Isle knitting that actually was showcased. It was treated like it was a really kind of like out of pocket thing to do. It's like the guy who actually used an identified Fair Isle technique is punished for using an identified Fair Isle technique, whereas people who were doing things that were so wildly not Fair Isle at all, like kind of slipped under the radar, you know? Yeah, I don't know, it felt very kind of like it was being misrepresented as something kind of like ridiculous to do rather than being an established part of the craft. Yeah, so that was really, really frustrating. And then, okay, so if we take the way they treated Fair Isle as a bit of a metaphor for how they've taken knitting so far, I think this audition task is a very good example of it, where it's just about speed, isn't it? It felt like that's what people were being marked on. So, for example, with the vests, I didn't see or hear anyone getting marked on tension, on colour choices. There were some people who, I think the woman who did the bunny vest and the dark blue behind the rabbits was really, really dominant when it should have been a background colour. And that was a great moment to talk about colour theory, wasn't it? And colour dominance. That wasn't talked about. There was the issue of finishing. And, you know, even like I liked Elsa, like I love her style. I liked what she did, but that poor hole at the back was not very well done or neatly finished. I get why the judges were like, oh, well, you've done something a bit different. But there was no acknowledgement, you know, if it was sewing bee, Esme or Patrick would have been in there immediately and being like, well, that's a good idea, but you didn't finish it, etc., or like you didn't finish it very well, etc., etc. There was also no interrogation around the brief. Like, they were told, okay, do something that represents you. Holger, who clearly was so not on it for the chunky wool at all, like, what? He, as far as I can tell, he just recreated the original pattern with slightly different colours and then said, oh yeah, it represents a chicken. And that was just never interrogated. There was no point where the judges look at him and say, okay, this tells us nothing about you. Like, they had that guy, Simon, talking about his IVF journey and representing that, and then Holger's just like, yes, there's like yellow, red and whatever represent a chicken. And that was fine. And the thing is, like, I love Holger. I'm happy for him to be able to like show how disdainful he is of all the chunky wool, etc., and kind of skate through. But what was the judging? I mean, someone, like, one of the vests didn't fit, like it couldn't be worn. If you don't have a wearable garment at the end, that should be the thing that sends you home, in my opinion. Alright, finish the brim of the hat. It's definitely, well, no, I was going to say it's going to be very small, but actually, like, this wool does, to be fair, stretch a lot, so yeah. Okay, so now I just need to increase one, and then I'm just doing back and forth for about 6 inches. So I think the judging was difficult, and I think that they were, you know, once again, to take the whole thing of like being too broad with how they're approaching it, and focusing only on speed, like the sofa thing. What? Okay, so hear me out. Pair up the contestants, and they, between them, have to make a cushion cover. And that, for a start, you have more objects to look at. It's much more manageable within the time they were in. It's still a collaborative task, and you have so many more interesting discussions and negotiations to have. You know, what design are you going to have? Does one of them want to do colour work and the other one want to do cables? How do they negotiate that? How are they going to match their tension? Are they just going to have it where one does the front and one does the back? Because that would solve some issues with tension. But then what about the fastening? When does the fastening happen? You know, because that's more work in theory, and how do they organise that between themselves? And I think you would have just got such a variety of things, wouldn't you? And it would have been such a great showcase of how diverse knitting is and how many different people approach it in different ways. Or have a crochet task, you know, they're saying it's all about crochet and everything as well, and everyone needs to know how to crochet. Well, I would have loved that contrast of, you have really amazing knitters, clearly, like, I think Holger's tension seemed to be pretty immaculate to me in the Farewell task, even if I think he didn't actually follow the brief. But then it would have been interesting to see, can he crochet as well? How would he feel if they were told, okay, and now you need to crochet something? I really wish they'd done a smaller team task. And I wish they'd had a third task. And the third task that I think would have been really great to see is, can you imagine if all the contestants just had to reach into a bag, grab something, and then make something with whatever skein they came out with? Like, someone's got boucle, someone's got glitter yarn, someone's got alpaca, something like that. Or if it feels like that wouldn't be even, just give everyone one skein and just say, yeah, you've got 4 hours, make something with this. Use whatever craft you want, knitting, crochet, it's fine. You know, and you'd have people making like a little scarf or something, obviously, but then you know, I mean, according to the audition task, you'd have them making 3 hats in that time. But maybe some people would also make something for the house, or make a toy, or an amigurumi or something. The number of different ways that could go, and I think that would be very in keeping with Sewing Bee, wouldn't it? And just like pushing on that creativity, because I feel like there are so many things that are part of knitting and crochet that just weren't showcased as part of this show at all, and that I would have loved to see more of. Yeah, I wish they'd been able to source their own patterns for the Fair Isle task as well, because pattern selection and yarn selection to go with that pattern is so important. Like, that is what will make or break a knit. And I think it would have been really interesting to see people come in with like really ambitious patterns, and then have the judges kind of be like, oh, well, have you thought about this, and see if they can adapt it the way that you see it on Sewing Bee. But then also people coming in with overly simple patterns and kind of finishing like 2 hours before everyone else, and then it's like, okay, well, what else can you do to this? Are you going to do a different kind of finishing for it? Or everyone's making a Fair Isle hat, and someone chose a much thicker weight of wool than everyone else, and just rattled through that hat and came up with something really quickly, and then was just sitting there watching everyone and realising that they needed to kind of do something extra. And then maybe steeked off the brim and knitted a new cable brim in something a bit more complicated or something. I don't know. I would have loved to have seen all of that stuff represented, and the fact that it wasn't, I mean, it's the first episode, but at the same time, the first episode sets a standard, doesn't it? I agree with a lot of people who say that the way the show has been promoted has felt quite obnoxious, the way it's constantly there's definitely overtones of it's not your granny's knitting, which is so dismissive and unpleasant to kind of see, because, you know, I aspire to the level of my granny's knitting. You know, all the people who knitted before us, the ones who developed and established this craft. But also, I do think that if we look at this photo of the two judges and the presenter, you know, all the stuff around the show has been talking about the diversity of knitting, how it's much different than people realise, talking about wanting to bring new knitters in, etc, etc. What about these knits suggests any kind of diversity in knitting? And I don't mean diversity in terms of skin colour, although I do think that there could be more diversity within the judging or with the presenter, you know, I don't think it needed to be 3 white people. But to go back to my original point, look at them. Pinks, reds, quite chunky, oversized looking knits, nothing fitted, nothing tailored. If you really wanted to show the diversity of knitting and crochet, for a start, one of them would have been wearing something crochet, because they have promoted the show as being crochet as well, so it feels very kind of like, alright, is the crochet in the room with us right now? And I can't believe I'm saying this, but where's the petite knit? Where's the simple tailored stuff? I would have just loved to have seen a contrast in the judges. One of them wearing the bright, wacky, kind of more artistic, more fun knitting, and another one wearing the tailored knitting. Knitting has progressed so much just in the last 10, 15 years. Since I started knitting, it's amazing what we can now do, and the fabrics we can now create, and the techniques which used to feel quite out of reach for your average knitter that are now available to us. Having someone there in a cloud sweater or something, or an ivy top, just to show how understated and, you know, kind of sophisticated knitting can be, but then to contrast it with the bright knits, I think that would have been really great. And Tom wearing that massive woolen poncho, which was very fun, I'm not denying it was fun, but dragging on the ground all the way, and it's just it's very it feels very fast fashion. That is not something that is designed to be worn more than once. It's something that by the time he finished filming it was probably really damaged. It just feels really kind of at odds with the nature of knitting, where it's a slow craft, something that a lot of people are making to last and to kind of be in their family for generations. There's no acknowledgement in the way that sewing bee does that knitting can actually be a very kind of meaningful kind of way of reducing our own carbon footprint. A lot of people get into knitting because they want to make their own clothes, because they don't want to be reliant on fast fashion. To have the presenter going around in something so unpractical, so intense, the kind of thing that most people would not want to wear, while saying that this is bringing more people to the craft. Yeah, once again, it felt like it was very much going for kind of something that was visually outlandish, or, you know, kind of grab attention, and it's yeah, they didn't have long to fit all of this stuff in, and I get they wanted to make an impact, but they had 3 people to showcase different knitwear on and to make that impact, and it feels like a very wasted opportunity so far. But basically at the minute, Tom Daly's knitwear and the judges' knitwear looks like it could all come out of the same wardrobe, and that to me does not represent your average knitter, and therefore I feel a little bit are we actually going to see the other side, or is knitting all the way through going to be represented as just this kind of fun, wacky, outlandish craft, you know? So that was a much longer rant than I meant to go on, and I can actually feel myself losing my voice because apparently I had this many thoughts about it. But let's see how I'm doing with the old hat. So it's just coming up to 30 minutes, so I'm a third of the way through, and when I made it on the size 10 needles, I was definitely a lot further than I am at the minute. Actually, you know what, I'll finish this row and then we'll kind of... So that's the brim, and I think probably about an inch. So probably double that again. And I think I went a bit slower because I was obviously like talking while knitting and stuff. So I'm gonna turn off the camera for a bit and crack on with this. I should stop the timer. And I will check back in with you when I get to decreasing for the rim. And at that point, I'm going to talk about what I would have done differently if I had actually attended the audition and had access to all of the materials. All right, wish me luck. All right, so we're at 55 minutes, and I've done the rim and the body of the hat. Oh God, falling off the needles. Yeah, so now I just need to start doing the decreases for the brim, which from memory only took about 10-15 minutes when I did it on the bigger needles, and then I will have 35 minutes to finish it off. So Stuart was mentioning in his video about how a lot of people were kind of trying to come up with extra embellishments to set themselves apart, because at the end of it, you put your finished hat into a plastic wallet with your name on, and then they get sent to the judges, and presumably they made some kind of assessment based on how much you got done in the 90 minutes, but also did you do any fun extras. So the photo he showed where he said he did get finished, and it's a hat without a brim. So I think to me that's an obvious place to kind of try and immediately make it a bit different or a bit special, is to do a brim. And he mentioned people were doing pom-poms, people were doing duplicate stitch, things like that. Maybe he didn't say they were doing duplicate stitch, but I would have done duplicate stitch. So I thought I'd talk a little bit about if I was in that audition environment, what would I have done to distinguish it? Because I think that the knitting would be how you could distinguish yourself, because as far as I can tell, the crochet square, it's very much can you follow the crochet pattern. So I wouldn't have gone rogue and done anything different with that. But what would I have done with the hat? So firstly, I think I would have, assuming that I had all the DPNs and everything and I could have knitted in the round, I think I would have tried to go top down. Sorry, just getting a bit confused. And I would have done it in brown. What I'd want to do is make it into a Christmas pudding. If I was feeling confident, if I was feeling like, yeah, I've pretty much got this, I would have started in white and I would have done an intarsia kind of like icing pattern on the hat and then switched to brown. So it looks like the icing on a Christmas pudding. And then I think if I had time at the end, I would start doing, first of all, I would add a red pom-pom to be the kind of the cherry or whatever it is on top. Actually, I don't know what is on top of a Christmas pudding. But yeah, the red thing on top. And then I would have duplicate stitched some little black currants all over it. And then if I had time after that, I think I would have crocheted some little green holly leaves. And I feel like that's a kind of a fun, easy way to distinguish yourself without giving yourself loads of extra work. If I was less confident on time, like if I was kind of a bit like, oh, I don't know if I'm going to make it, I think would still have tried to do a brim, because I feel like a brim just gives the hat so much more structure. I think you could maybe also do it kind of like an eyeball, maybe, like if you did it in white and then had the iris with duplicate stitch. But yeah, I think that's the direction I would have taken it in. I have no idea if I would have passed the kind of the personality side of things. I kind of suspect not, and I think I would have really struggled to do anything creative in that environment with so many people and so much talking and everything. But yeah, that's how I would try and distinguish myself a bit. So what I'm going to do now is stop distracting myself from the pattern and finish the hat and see how long that takes me, and then I'm going to crack on and do the square. And the square I'm definitely going to have to concentrate more on, but basically gonna start it now, and we'll check back in with you when I've done the square to let you know how the hat went, how the square went, do I think I would have passed the audition, and any final thoughts that may have occurred to me, because I've just seen that Gordon, the guy who got sent home for doing the steeking and everything, has uploaded a video going into a bit more detail about what he did and why he did it. So I'm going to check that out as well. I don't think I was going to need to update again, because I was like, the crochet one, I'll just do it and show at the end. No drama. Oh, I am struggling so much with this. I am 20 minutes in, so I've had 25 minutes. I'm up to this point, so it's a circle, and then this is the first corner, and just for me to get from here, where it's like a little circle, to doing the corner just took about 10 minutes. The one rule I have for myself is that I'm refusing to look up any videos or any stitches, you know, like I've got a picture, I've got the written instructions, that needs to be enough. I have checked that this is definitely in US terms because part of me was just so kind of like, what is happening here? But yeah, this is proving to be incredibly frustrating. I actually thought I would find this one a lot easier than the knitting one, and I don't know if it's just because I've been doing lots of knitting recently, but yeah, I am frustrated and struggling to the point that my dog's picked up on it and is now getting very anxious about how much I'm kind of struggling with this. So yeah, not quite as calm and chill as I was expecting it to be. I'll check back in with you after the 45 minutes. Alright, I actually found this so stressful that my dog has just crawled into my lap, like put herself there, and it's very much like, that's enough crochet for you today. Yeah, I would not get on this show. Like, part of me would love to be on it, but I'm just clearly like, apparently I'm fine with knitting, but the crochet thing, even crocheting something I have technically made before, it's just not a good time for me, and I feel really bad for the contestants. I watched Gordon's video, and it was so great, and I think he has so many insights and he gives so much more context about Fair Isle knitting and about why he had difficulty with things. You know, he made his own knitting needles to do that, to stay within the Fair Isle tradition of like knitting on double pointed needles for it. I mean, amazing, applause. So interesting. I'm actually going to cut quite a bit of what I said earlier about the whole Fair Isle thing because I feel like he just makes those points so much better. So I'm going to link to his video in the description as well. But yeah, I'm gonna come back to this and try to finish it off later, and I will still do the video showing how far I got. But yeah, I mean, I think this is the thing with the show seemingly only focused on speed, like that's what it seems to be kind of focused on more than anything else. I just think it doesn't leave room for any of the other actually important or interesting things about knitting. Like, you tell me, like, okay, name the top 10 most important things to being a good knitter or being a good crocheter or a successful or whatever you want to call it, and I still wouldn't list speed, you know? It's like your tension, understanding colour issues, understanding the fabric you're working with, like the fibres of the wool, understanding the techniques you're using, design principles, all of that stuff. Like, speed does not register as an important part of this process. And I guess that's why it's taken a while for a knitting show to be made in this kind of competition format, where it's like, because you know, with sewing does fit into a tighter time scale, baking actually, speed and the rate that you do things is actually pretty important and a big part of it, so it makes sense for those things. But yeah, knitting, I think they've not got it right yet, and I think it's definitely not a show for a knitter like myself, where I feel like I have got a decent array of skills and I can do some of this stuff, but I just think the stress of sitting in what looks like quite a small studio space in the yarn barn and not having TV, none of them as far as I could tell were using headphones or anything, no distraction, just constant knitting, I think the pressure would really get to me. But yeah, I'm gonna chill out with my dog a little bit, maybe make her some lunch and then try and finish the square. Hey, it's a couple of days later, so I did go on to finish the square. I took a very long break, took my dog for a walk. I know fellow dog owners will be looking at that and thinking she jumped in your lap because she wanted lunch or she wanted a walk, but no, it was not time for anything. And normally she's an old girl, she's happy to chill. It was very out of character for her to muscle her way into my lap suddenly and just be like, no more of this. In fact, she knows kind of not to try and get into my lap when I'm doing knitting and crocheting. So she clearly was just like, you know what, this is too much, you're getting too tense, that's enough of this for today. I did not finish the square, and I'm really surprised by that because that was actually, I really thought, as I think I already said, that I would do better with the square than I would with the knitting. I consider myself to be a better crocheter than a knitter, even though I've been knitting for longer. I feel better able to problem solve things with crochet. I make up my own patterns for crochet a lot more than I do for knitting. So the fact that I struggled so much with that was really like, part of me was like, am I just tired? But no, it was just, yeah, I did not enjoy it. And it did really bring it home to me, this whole kind of talking about the first episode and also doing the audition tasks, how much I would not want to be on the show. Like, I thought I would. I thought if it gets better, if they do another series, I'd apply, but honestly, I just found it very unpleasant and stressful. So I did finish the hat. I finished in about 75 minutes, so it didn't make any difference going down 2 needle sizes. Maybe the tension is slightly better, but not really. This is the fit. I'm going to buy another pom-pom to put on it before I donate it. Not much to say about that beyond it's not fun to just constantly knit for 90 minutes, even if in the middle of it you're doing a massive rant about the history of English oppression in Scotland. So, but yeah, technically finished. Like I said, the square I did not finish. Where's my cushion? So I did this much. As you can see, this is the second last round, and I did not finish it completely in the 45 minutes. And there was another round to do afterwards, and my tension's really out. So all of these squares are actually much smaller than this one. So I guess I take from that either my tension's loosened massively, which it has not, or when I get stressed, apparently I crochet a lot more loosely. So yeah, I mean, I'm just gonna frog this now, I think. And that's a bit frustrating because I knew I was gonna get 2 hats out of doing this, and I was like, okay, like that's just cherry shot. But I genuinely thought, oh, I'll do the square and then I can add it to my chair and maybe it'll inspire me to do a few more. Whereas actually I feel like I don't want to do that pattern again for a long time. So I still think I probably would have passed the crochet task as well. Like I got very close to the end. I think it shows that I've got enough skill. I think I got close enough to the end that there wouldn't have been a concern of, is she going to finish anything if she has to crochet? Like I said, I don't know about the personality portion. I suspect I'm definitely not the person. And yeah, the whole having to do things quickly to a pattern that I hadn't really picked. You know, like I wouldn't pick to do a beanie in 90 minutes. If you said knit me something in 90 minutes, I would not pick a hat. And I would also just not choose that square if someone was like, crochet me a square. Like I would just do a granny square or something. I don't know. I think not choosing the patterns would definitely have killed my motivation. And it just really brings up home how talented these people are. Like I feel like they are definitely not being given a platform to showcase their skills, which is another disappointment. But you can, like, for them to have got through that, they are clearly all very, very competent at what they do. And I've seen some people criticising Dipti, for example, because she didn't know how to purl and everything, but it's like she did make a tank top in 12 hours. Yes, the neckline was off, but that would have taken like another 30 minutes to fix if she'd had the time. Yeah, I'm going to keep watching the show. Obviously, we've got the second episode coming up tonight, but I just really hope that they switch it up a bit, that they have different tasks, that they give more time to the details of crochet, and that they give the contestants more of a platform to showcase their skills. Alright, thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, do whatever you want. Bye!